Welcome to the MS-Perspektive podcast. Perspective with a K, as I'm German. I'm Nele Handwerker, MS patient, patient advocate and author. I'm bringing you interviews, inspiration and information about living with multiple sclerosis and show you ways how you can positively influence the disease and make the best out of your diagnosis. On ms-perspektive.com, you will find the show notes, 11 free tips as a PDF, and lots of other information. And now the show begins.
This podcast is supported by Mid-Mission, a project of the nonprofit Hertie Foundation.
Hello and welcome to episode number 11, Empowerment Through Adventure, an interview with Lori Schneider. Lori Schneider is a mountaineer, adventurer, author, educator, speaker and advocate and an MS patient, and she lives in Bayfield Town, Wisconsin in the United States. And now the interview begins. Hello, Lori. It's such a pleasure to have you today on the show. A warm welcome to North Wisconsin.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm thrilled to be able to speak with you. I've been to Germany many times, and some of my family heritage is from there. So I'm glad to be part of your show today.
Yeah, thank you. And it's kind of obvious with your last name, Schneider is a very German name. But before we get into the interview, could you please introduce yourself to the listeners briefly so they know who is here on the show today?
Yeah, my name is Lori Schneider, and, I'm a happy person who enjoys life. I spent my childhood growing up with a wonderful family in Wisconsin, in the Midwest part of the United States, and, have a great family. And then several years ago, I met an incredibly fantastic man, and we got married, and he's got a lovely family as well. And so we enjoy doing things together. He loves to hike also, and he was a climber, a rock climber. And we go to the gym several times a week and, lift weights and just get out and hike and enjoy nature. And in the winters, we usually leave the cold and snow of Wisconsin, and we've started going to Arizona where the temperatures are much more pleasant, so we can do some hiking there too. So life is good. I'm happy, and that I was able to climb many mountains when, a few years back, climb the highest peak on each of the 7 continents. But now I'm content to just go for walks and enjoy life.
Sounds very good. And we will come to the mountains later on in the interview. But first, we want to talk a little bit about your diagnosis. When were you diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and what led to it?
It was back in 1999. I woke up one morning and I swung my leg out of bed. I was going to get on my treadmill before I went to work as a teacher. And I realized that I was numb from head to toe on one whole side of my body. And the doctors, feared the worst, and they tested me for a lot of different diseases because of all the numbness and the tingling that I was feeling. And they didn't diagnose me correctly for about 3 months. But, it really was started with that initial, numbness that came right away.
Okay, yeah. And did you have any previous symptoms that in retrospect were related to MS?
When I look back the prior 10 years, maybe even 20 years, every once in a while I would have muscle spasms in my leg and some weakness. And they just said, oh, you have, maybe an autoimmune problem. And nobody really diagnosed it because it always went away and it wasn't causing me any difficulty. But when I look back now, I believe that was probably the early onset of the MS, because I was 43 when I got diagnosed. But I believe I probably had it for a while.
Yeah, probably more in the beginning of the 20s, but in a mild version. Yeah. How were you feeling about the diagnosis, and what was it like for your loved ones?
I was so afraid. I panicked. And I didn't know anything about MS, and my family and my husband at the time, we didn't know about it. And all we thought was that it was going to cripple me very quickly. And so I was afraid, I was depressed. And even though the symptoms went away, that remained with me.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. And I think most people with MS know that horrible situation at the beginning when you are just totally afraid of the future. And was that your rock bottom with MS or another situation? And how did you fight your way back out?
You know, the rock bottom for me, even after the symptoms had gone away in a few months, the fear remained. And for me, I decided I wanted to do everything I could while I still had good use of my leg. So I talked with my husband and I said, I have to leave. I have to experience life. So I had been married 22 years. I left my husband in my marriage. I left my teaching job of 20 years and I left my community, my friends and support system. And I moved back to the Midwest where my family was from in order to find myself again. And I really didn't find my comfort zone and strength again until I started climbing mountains. And I realized that I had to believe in myself again. And for me to find that strength, I did it through climbing, and I got back my physical strength, surprisingly, from all the exercise. But most importantly, I got back my emotional and mental strength. And that, for me, was the turning point in being happy again.
So important, yes. And I mean, I met for the German podcast, I met already a few people who are not in that good shape physically. But if they are emotionally strong, that's so more important. I mean, you can live with many things as long as you are stable in your mindset, you are more or less happy. And yeah, I can totally understand that. Did you receive any recommendations for disease-modifying therapies at the beginning? And what was your decision?
You know, it was 25 years ago when I was diagnosed, so there weren't a lot of choices. And what the doctors immediately did was put me on intravenous steroid treatment. And I was in the hospital for 5 days with the treatments. And eventually my numbness went away. But it's different with every person. And now there are so many options. And the important thing is to talk with your own neurologist and find what works best for your system, because what works for one person might be totally different for another. And you really have to keep on top of it. I still get annual brain MRIs. I just saw my neurologist because we don't know what's happening oftentimes. But you really have to customize your treatment plan for what works for you.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm studying multiple sclerosis management since 1 year, more or less. And it's very obvious that there are different subtypes of people living with MS. So individualized treatment is really key. So I guess it sounds like you have had no change in therapy so far.
You know, I added things to my therapy. Over the years, I had a relapse in 2006 and had some optic neuritis and had to go back on the intravenous steroid treatment for a while. But mostly over the years, I've added alternative therapies. I do a lot of stretching, yoga type things. I do muscle strengthening activities. I try to keep my mind calm, and I do meditation oftentimes. And I really have a healthy diet and lifestyle. You know, my doctor recommended that I take vitamin D3 and calcium along with that, and also omega fatty oils. So I do all those things in addition to treating symptoms when they arise. But It has worked out very well for me.
Yes, and I mean that lifestyle you are talking about sounds very good, very healthy, and that's of course extremely good for the immune system, and you keep the nervous immune parts a bit below the surface. So I think that's quite good. How are you currently doing with your MS?
I am doing incredibly well, and I'm one of the very lucky people with this disease. I've only had a couple of major relapses, but I haven't had any relapse in 16 years. And right now I have no symptoms, and my neurologist feels confident, given my age of 67 years old, that I most likely will not have symptoms anymore. And like I said, I'm very lucky because there are so many people that struggle on lots of levels. And I'm able to now really look at my MS as something that doesn't define me anymore in a negative way. It's something I experienced that in many ways made me stronger, at least mentally stronger. And so I'm happy again in life, and I'm feeling very positive about it.
That's good. It's nice to hear. It's always good for me as well. I mean, I'm belong to the lucky ones, but of course, you are a few years older, not many, but it's of course good to see positive examples that are just staying active and get good rewards for that. So let's come to the climbing part. Did you decide right away to climb the 7 summits, or how did that plan evolve?
I had climbed one mountain before I was diagnosed. I had climbed Mount Kilimanjaro with my father, and I was training to climb the highest peak in South America, Mount Aconcagua, when I woke up with all of the numbness from the MS. And at that point, I didn't have a plan to climb anything other than I was having fun climbing with my dad. And once I got diagnosed with MS, I realized that I needed to prove to myself that I was still in charge of my body and my physical health in many ways. And as a teacher of 20 years, I taught young children and handicapped kids, and my message to them was always, don't be afraid to try and believe in yourself. And I really needed to start believing in myself again. And that's when I thought, you know what, I'm going to try to climb all of the highest peaks on each continent while I still have good use of my legs. And really that got me started, but it took a long time to complete that goal.
I can imagine. And I mean, you said you just climbed one mountain before. So how did you prepare yourself for climbing all these really high peaks? Or at least some of them are really high.
Yeah. Well, I started out before any of the big climbs, each of those 7 summit climbs. I trained for a whole year because I needed to get my body in the best shape that I could. So I would go to the gym a few times a week, but I also really focused on walking and hiking. And most days when I was training, I would do about a 5K hike every single morning. And I would put on, a 20K pack and 40, 50 pounds and walk up and down hills just to get my back used to carrying weight, because I had to carry weight on all of those climbs. And I also had to work a lot on my balance. And I know a lot of people with MS have balance issues, and that was my biggest problem even after my symptoms went away. So I would sit on a balance ball, a rubber ball, and, I could be eating dinner and I would be holding my plate, balancing just for practice. Okay. Or I had this round disc that had a small ball underneath it, and I would try to keep in balance, and I really tried to keep my core strength. So I was doing those things, but I also had to mentally train and remind myself that all I had to do was try. I couldn't predict the outcome because I didn't know if I could make it or not, but I had to let go of caring if I was going to succeed or not, because to me, the success was in just getting out there and trying. And so, mentally, I had to let go of the fear and just say, what the heck, give it a shot. And if you make it, you make it, great. But if you don't, there's no failure. There is absolutely no failure in trying. And I was very determined to just try my best and then give myself a break, do what I could. So, and we all have to do that. We have to just say, yes, I succeeded. I don't care if I went up a half a mountain. It was success in my mind.
Yes, because I gave it a try. Yes. And I really try. I really try to prepare myself and everything. Absolutely. Yeah. Totally agree. And how was it financially? Because you said, you stopped working. So it's expensive, I guess.
Yes, that was its own mountain. I did not have the financial means to climb those peaks. At first, I sold my house and I used what money I had to finance the first climbs, and I would spread them out every couple of years. But toward the end, I had no financial means left. So I went to a bank. I took out a bank loan. And once I finished climbing the 7 summits, I started a speaking career, and I was getting paid eventually to speak. And so I paid off the loan that way. But I thought, I can't rule out doing the things that I love because they're financially expensive. I didn't have sponsors. I just figured out, how can I borrow the money and then how can I repay it?
Okay. So again, probably not without any fear, but going fearless for your goals. That's good. How long did it take you to finalize that goal? And have there been any setbacks? You reached at the end the goal, but did it all work out like you planned it?
Well, it took me 16 years to accomplish from the first climb to the end. And most people said, how can you keep going? How can you keep going? It's taking so long. And the setbacks were the financial setbacks for sure, because I had to, take out the loan once I ran out of money. And then, 2006, 6 or 7 years after I had, created this goal was when I had the optic neuritis again, and I started to lose vision in one eye. So I had to go back on treatments in the hospital. But my neurologist said, you'll get your strength back. And when you do, if you want to continue with your goal, we know that your body is managing this all right. So there were setbacks, but the setback was mental temporarily, and then I had to think, okay, come on, get back at it. So.
You can do it, yes. And you did. It's so phenomenal. When I first heard about you, I was so impressed. It's just incredible. What led to the you did even some more things. You went to Mount Kilimanjaro with a group of people with MS and people with Parkinson. What led to that concept of not even just doing it for your own, but bringing other people to one high peak, the highest peak on Africa?
After I completed climbing the highest peak on each continent, I thought, I've finished that goal. What do I want to do with the rest of my life? And what I realized was that I no longer needed to prove anything to myself. Through climbing, I had regained my strength and courage and belief that it was worth trying anything I wanted to do. So I wanted to share that with other people. Again, as a teacher, I wanted kids to believe in themselves. And I thought, what better way to help other people with neurological diseases like MS and Parkinson's disease. It's also a neurological disease. What better way to help them than taking them on this journey where they find their own strength? They learn that they are stronger than they think they are. So I organized a group of 10 people with MS, 4 with Parkinson's disease, and then 14 companion climbers. So each person with a disease had a person without that would walk with them and become their friend through this journey and even before. And in the end, we all reached the goal of self-empowerment. And 7 of the 10 with MS reached the summit of Kilimanjaro, and all 4 with Parkinson's reached the summit and their partners along with them. So it was just a fabulous experience for everybody because we came away bonded as a group of, support for each other, but also realizing our own inner strength.
Absolutely. Yes. Sounds so great. And just one question. The partner. So they were not friends. They were not the life partner or some other good friend always. They were sometimes strangers before.
They were complete strangers.
Okay.
I had started recruiting people who would want to be on the climb months and almost a year in advance. And 6 months before the climb, I matched people by personalities and interests, not age necessarily. But, one partner group, they were both really into music, loved music, and I put them together. Another person was a mathematician and a scientist, and they had, this intellectual bond that was really amazing, and I put them together. Another was interested in yoga and meditation, and so was their partner. So I really put them together 6 months in advance, and then they started to communicate as friends. Some of them met ahead of time. They all talked and communicated via, social media together. And so when we all got to Africa, we were already bonded as a family of people there to help one another. And that really made it special, So, and my father was my partner.
Nice.
I climbed with him the first time, many years prior in 1993. My dad and I climbed it together, and he summited on his 61st birthday. So then as we went on this trip, this second time around, I invited him to be my partner. And this time he was 78. And so it was amazing for me to have my dad with me again. Yeah, really powerful.
Wow, you have a really sporty, or you had a really sporty dad. So great. I mean, he was.
Yeah, he's 91.
Oh, he's 91. Fantastic.
Yes, now he is. And he still golfs and gets out for walks. And so I'm very fortunate that.
Absolutely. That's so beautiful.
My inspiration for the hiking.
I can imagine. I mean, he brought you there and he 78. Wow. Going up Mount Kilimanjaro. I think you start off in the heat and then you end up where it's pretty cold, isn't it?
Oh, freezing you wear down jackets and, and heavy gloves and mittens and hats. So yes, very cold.
And were you lucky and had a nice view, or was it all cloudy?
It was fairly nice when we were there this time around. And, so it's wonderful just to look out over, Africa and Africa is such a special place anyway. So it was really powerful. And then we all went on safari together afterwards for about a week. So
that's good.
That was a perfect ending.
You treated yourself nicely afterwards. That's good.
Yes, the whole group went. So, yeah.
So great. And in your experience, what are some of the most effective coping strategies or self-care practices for managing the daily challenges of living with MS?
For me, I think it's just all about resilience, and life can be good if you let it. And you really have to think about your own objectives, what you like to do, and find those things that bring you joy. And that helps you cope. Other people, it's hard for them to understand what it's like to have MS, because with many people, it's just difficult. They look at you and they think, well, she looks fine. He looks fine. And sometimes you're not feeling fine. And so you really have to be your own advocate and rest when you need to rest, and be with people when you need to have somebody socially, uplift you and mentally uplift you, but really be your own advocate and ask for what you need.
Yeah, good advice. How important is mental health and emotional well-being for individuals with MS? I mean, you had that group, so it's not just you and your own experiences, but you were together with other people with MS. And what support did you offer in this regard, or do you still? I don't know.
For me, I was so afraid at first I didn't share my diagnosis for a whole year with anybody, because I was embarrassed about it and, just afraid people would look at me as weak. But when I finally got the courage to share it, I started participating in MS events, which I think was so important. MS walks and MS bike rides and MS swims. And then I started talking with people about it and, doing some, interviews and really sharing my story. And toward the end, I was doing a lot of public speaking, which I still do. And for me, it was all about getting people involved so that they're not afraid to share their stories. And then for a while, I was organizing group activities like the Kilimanjaro climb. And I took some groups to Canada to do helicopter assisted hiking, which works for any physical level. Even if you have real mobility issues, a helicopter takes you to some amazing places. You can sit on a rock and be there and enjoy the mountains, or you can hike. And so I was doing that really to encourage people just to get out and not be afraid to tell people you have MS and talk about it, and find the strength through the MS societies. So.
Very important, yeah. And I have to admit that I was one of the persons not talking about my MS for quite a long time. I mean, my family was aware and my best friends, but nobody else for 15 years.
Wow. Yeah.
Yes, because I didn't want it to get any, prejudices or somebody telling me I'm not reaching certain goals or looking at me like, oh, poor you.
Yes.
I didn't want that.
And it's a hard secret to keep, because you beat yourself up inside sometimes, because you want to be open and upfront, but you don't want to be judged. And what I realized was it was my own judgment that was getting in my way. I was looking at myself as not strong enough to deal with this. Once I felt strong enough, it was okay. And I didn't feel like my MS label defined me anymore. I felt that it was okay to just be human. We're all human. We all have something, mine is MS, but, you could have, emotional difficulties, physical difficulties, financial difficulties. We have to rely on our own strength, but give our friends and families a chance to help us through our problems as well.
Absolutely. Totally agree. And maybe I should have done a few summits. Maybe it would have eased my own way. But anyhow, life is like it is. You already talked about the initiatives you are supporting. Which ones are you still supporting to raise awareness about MS and educating the public about our condition?
For me, I think it's so important to become involved in your, the World MS Day.org is a wonderful, wonderful entity that helps. The National MS Society has wonderful information, and the European MS platform has wonderful information out there. And I think we really need to support those people who are giving us help along the way. Another thing that I think is important for the future of MS is to continue to find therapies, oral therapies, MS patches, different things where it's not so invasive, because I believe that even though there's some fabulous therapies that are, injectables, mentally that's a hard thing sometimes to wrap your head around, because you look at yourself as a person who needs medicine, where if I take a tablet, it doesn't seem so bad. so I hope that, the future of MS will progress into those kinds of things.
Yes, and there are so many smart people working on it. So I think it will be done sooner or later. Can you share any recommendations how individuals with MS can actively advocate for themselves? You were mentioning quite often that it's so important to advocate for yourself so that they can ensure to receive appropriate care, support, and accommodations.
Well, I think, first of all, go to your local and national MS societies, because they oftentimes have support people that they will assign you a one-on-one, connection to help you with things. And I also think that it's really important to find some kind of a physical outlet. For me, it's the yoga and stretching and being a member of a gym. Also join some social activities, and really remember that a big part of strengthening yourself isn't just the physical strengthening, it's your support system strength. So you've got to find, friends to connect with and keep involved and keep active. That's so, so important with the whole healing process.
It is, absolutely. What advice would you give to people with MS who may be feeling overwhelmed or discouraged, like it is often at the beginning, and how can they maintain a positive outlook?
Well, I think so much of it is remembering not to define yourself by the disease. The disease is part of you, but it's not something that it's all you are. I'm Lori. I'm not MS. I have MS. It can make you stronger if you let go of the fear, because it got me to try things I would have never tried. Did I ever think I was going to climb Mount Everest?
Probably not.
Are you kidding? In fact, I thought, well, I can't do MS. I can't do Everest because I have MS. But I finally got to the point where I thought, you know what, just get out and try things in life. So, you've got to remember to be resilient and give yourself a chance to try things, whatever they may be, physical goals, music, intellectual goals, whatever you want to do, but be resilient and keep trying.
Yes. And as you just mentioned it, I can just recommend to everybody to watch your TED Talk on climbing Mount Everest. So impressive. I was doing it, and it was really a nice idea of getting how hard it is to do every step on that highest peak of our Earth.
Yeah. Well,
quite impressive.
Well, thank you. I was very fortunate to be asked to do a TED Talk in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And it was very exciting for me to do that. And I think it helped others see what it was like to climb the mountains. And it helped me to once again get beyond the fear and talk about my disease.
Yeah, for sure. It helped other people for sure. Okay, so we are coming to the quickfire Q&A session. Complete the sentence. For me, multiple sclerosis is.
multiple sclerosis is a disease that can cause us to have a lot of fear of the unknown, but I believe that it's the unknown that can then give us strength to try things we might never have tried.
Yep. Is for sure true for me. Which website can you recommend for people living with MS?
I love the worldmsday.org website. The National MS Society.org is a fantastic resource, and the EMSP.org, the European MS Society, is a wonderful resource as well. Those are ones that I send people to when I can't answer their questions, and I think they're wonderful.
Yes, and they are all linked in the show notes. What development would you like to see in the field of multiple sclerosis in the next 5 years?
Well, in the next 5 years, I hope that neurologists and MS societies remember to have people try alternative therapies in addition to their medical treatment. I think people need to remember that it's about strengthening the body on all levels and not just taking an injection or a pill, but really to treat the whole person. So, get out there, try some things that will strengthen your body, but also strengthen your mind and your sense of well-being.
Very good. Finally, what message of hope or encouragement would you like to share with the individuals living with MS?
My message of hope is don't give up on your dreams. Put things in your heart and your mind that you want to do, and then go out there and give it a try. Don't define yourself by what you can't do, but define yourself by what you'd like to do and go out there and do it. And that's the important part. It's just believing in yourself again and having the strength and courage to keep going.
Very good advice. Lori, it was such a pleasure talking to you, and it's such an honor knowing you. How and where can interested people find you online?
LoriSchneider.net is my website, and it has my contact information on there. And I do write back to every person that emails me. It's on my website, but it's also Lori@etadventure.com. ET Adventure stands for Empowerment Through Adventure. So you can also write out the whole Lori at Empowerment Through Adventure. But, and I really feel like my goal and purpose now is just to be an encouragement to others and an ear to listen, because I was afraid to talk to people about my MS when I had it. I thought no one would understand. Nobody wanted to hear me whine or complain. And I feel like the gift that we can give others is to be a good listener. And, I'm happy to share any information and experience, because that's how we learn from one another. So, people absolutely can write, and I'm more than happy to share what knowledge I've learned from other people and through life. So
thank you very much. Thank you very much for sharing your story. Thank you very much for being so grateful. And I hope you will have many nice hikes, many nice trips to Arizona, and lifting weights in the gym. And I will follow you a little bit on LinkedIn if things happening there.
Yeah.
And thank you very much, Lori.
Well, thank you. Life is good, and it is what we make it. So thank you for allowing me to share my story. And I'm so impressed by what you do. So thank you for being an inspiration to so many. You're wonderful.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed the interview and maybe got inspired to do some exercise on your own. I mean, it doesn't have to be the highest peaks in the world on each continent, but maybe some smaller goals which are achievable for you. Or maybe you think at the beginning they are not achievable and then they are, as Lori showed, quite impressive. By the way, next time I'm talking about the MS symptoms, which ones are typical at the beginning, which ones might show up later on, and which ones belong to MS. Because at the beginning, when you are diagnosed, you might not know which types of symptoms can be part of multiple sclerosis. So please tune in and hear you next time. Thank you for listening today. I hope you found it helpful. You may also be interested in the previously published episodes and posts, which you can find at ms-perspektive.com/podcast. Perspective with a K. You can also get a free PDF with 11 tips for your positive impact on MS at ms-perspektive.com/newsletter. If you'd like to get in touch, you can reach me at nele@ms-perspektive.com or on social media. Hear you next time.